Hi, everybody. Bryan Norcross here with your Saturday evening update on what is now Tropical Storm Debby. The system quickly came together this afternoon as the center has moved off the Cuban coast into the extreme southern Gulf of Mexico over the very warm water, and the environmental pattern is essentially perfect over top of it. And so this has spun up quickly into a tropical storm. It's only a 40-mile-an-hour tropical storm right now, and it has turned a little bit, so now moving to the northwest at 15 miles per hour. Pressure down a little bit, estimated pressure at 1,007 millibars. The big changes with this update now, as of 5 o'clock, is since the system has developed sooner than was forecast, it has longer over the Gulf of Mexico as a developed system. Now it is explicitly forecast to be a hurricane at landfall in the Big Bend area of North Florida, kind of southeast of Tallahassee and well north of Tampa. But it's going to come close enough, and it's a pretty big system. You can see on the satellite the size of the circulation. So it's bigger than the state of Florida. So you can see easily that these bands that are already impacting parts of the state as the system moves parallel to the coastline are going to continue to do that. And as the system gets stronger, there are going to be tropical storm force winds in those bands. We've already seen tropical storm force gusts significantly more than once. I mean, a whole lot of times in the Keys today and offshore. So we're expecting all this to winds to be 40 miles per hour or higher along much of the coast, especially in gusts. In some areas, we'll have those sustained winds, so that's why the tropical storm warnings are in effect up and down the coast. Let's take a close-up look at this here, and you can see what's happening right around the center. You see that burst of a thunderstorm developing there? So this is the process. Is when thunderstorms develop around the center, this allows the intensification process to happen, and the outer bands and feeder bands and whatnot feed into that center, and the wind flows into that center. And increasingly, as the air rises in that center, pulls more wind in and more air in, and then you get increasing intensity in the system. So this is just the first step, just made it to a 40-mile-per-hour system, but what we're seeing on the satellite here is the traditional development of a tropical system. We also see these well-defined bands, strong ones over here on the east side, and in Miami-Dade County and in the Keys, we have seen them today, and migrating north up through southeast Florida. You notice on the west side, the bands are not as robust looking. They're just kind of thinner, and some of them are kind of coming apart. As a matter of fact, some of this is not even a band. This is actually the wind going the other way in the upper levels of the atmosphere, which is also a sign actually of an ideal environment. But all of the strong winds are to the east of the center, over 100 miles to the east of the center. As a matter of fact, they extend out. So this is a large system in the direction of Florida already, and that's why we have all these tropical storm warnings and watches, and then of course, well to the north, hurricane warnings issued now at 5 o'clock for that Big Bend area where the center is forecast to come ashore. On the radar coming out of Key West, we can see that center trying to form in there, and you see the lightning in the center is often a sign of a developing system. We can also see these very strong bands with lots of lightning. See that one there? That one's heading up into the Keys. When we look at the wider view, you can see that one is heading into the middle to upper Keys. Here's the one that was in Miami-Dade County, produced actually severe thunderstorm warnings with that one. And then these bands farther away have been robust during the heating of the day. Now they're kind of dying out, but you can see this concentration here around the center of circulation. Over here, we have storms going on. You see the lightning out there, but it's out of radar range. That's why we're not seeing it that far from the Key West radar. All right, so here's the forecast of the new cone issued at 5 o'clock Eastern Time from the National Hurricane Center. You see the storm is forecast to intensify, and in their forecast, fairly slowly intensify. The thinking is it's a big circulation. It's going to take time to concentrate essentially the energy of the system around a center. But we saw it come together sooner than expected because of the very warm waters there and also the very pristine atmosphere for intensification. So we're going to, when we see 45 miles per hour, we're going to imagine that it could be stronger, but well offshore. This is the center now. Remember that the storm is much bigger than this. So if the center is here somewhere, we're talking about a circulation like this that is going to impact the whole state, and obviously closer to the center, the winds will be stronger. That's why we have the tropical storm warnings in effect for this southeastern and the western and western part of the state of Florida. All right, moving ahead, continued intensification. Again, we'll see how quickly it intensifies. The computer forecasts do not have it rapidly intensify like we saw Hurricane Idalia do last year, but we're going to keep an open mind about that and not 100% sure that that's not going to intensify somewhat more rapidly, since we have seen this early intensification in the system. But again, one of the things going against it is its big size in terms of getting strong, but it spreads the energy out over this larger area, which impacts the state of Florida. Again, tracking only the center of the storm now, not the impacts at all, remember. And you see that the new expectation is that Monday, and this would be Monday afternoon-ish, after the noontime hour, that it comes ashore as a hurricane is the explicit forecast from the Hurricane Center now. That's why they've issued hurricane warnings up there. Notice that if it takes the west side of the track, Tallahassee is going to get strong winds, although the system would come over land before it can get to Tallahassee, which is inland there. But in this area around Perry, this county right here in the middle is Taylor County. The big city there is Perry in that county. Obviously, it doesn't have to go, that's not very far inland there. And then it goes into this stalling mode, and we're dealing with some kind of a drifting storm. It's forecast to weaken significantly over land, but then the question is, does it come out over the water? This anticipates that it does for at least a while, but honestly, nobody knows what's going to happen in this time period from late on Monday through late on Thursday in this area, because the system will move slowly. It's guaranteed to dump a lot of rain. Rain forecasts from 12 to 18 inches in a corridor there, which I'll show you in just a little bit. But where will the strongest winds be? Will it move back over the Atlantic, intensify even more than 60 miles an hour? Where might there be storm surge? Where is the heaviest rain going to fall? All of that is an open question, but nothing good is going to happen with a meandering either tropical storm or potentially hurricane if it moves back out over the Atlantic for days. That we're going to be watching that at least 3 or 4 days on the current forecast. And indeed, that's the consensus of the computer forecast models. Here they are out to 5 days, and you can see it looks like a bowl of spaghetti here because they're just doubling over themselves, indicating a stall. Even this one here loops the storm around and comes back out of the Gulf of Mexico. So we're not looking at any one explicitly, just the consensus of them is that the storm will stall and maybe meander over the ocean, maybe turn back inland, maybe do a loop, something, because what happens was when there are no steering currents in the atmosphere, there's no river essentially. It's like the hurricane is in a lake, and small little factors that we can't forecast certainly, and sometimes can't even detect until we actually see the storm move. We don't know where it's going and exactly how it's going to maneuver. So that's what happens when storms stall out. So unfortunately, this is going to be a long duration event from North Florida, from Tallahassee to Jacksonville, on up through Savannah, Columbus, Wilmington, maybe even up to Cape Hatteras, but certainly focused in that corridor there of 4 different states along the southeast coast. So we'll see exactly how that works out. So this will show you. So we look at these models to see how much uncertainty is kind of built into the atmosphere. And you see pretty high confidence where it is, not 100% confidence, a pretty high confidence where that low center is going to develop. Now watch as we go forward in time. So we have reasonably high confidence that the system is going to stay offshore, but just like the cone shows, maybe it's closer to Tampa with stronger winds and potentially higher storm surge push into Tampa Bay, or maybe it's well offshore, and that would obviously threaten farther west in the Panhandle and have less wind along the west coast of Florida. Then we go forward in time and things spread out some, but high confidence that it's going to come into the Big Bend of Florida, but maybe it comes in sooner, maybe it comes in later, because here we get to where some of the computer forecasts actually continue the system moving. Many of them lag it behind. So the Hurricane Center is kind of taking a middle ground there. But Monday morning sometime making landfall, probably, that's the best estimate right now. And then it just turns into random chaos and we don't really have any idea. But we do notice that a number of the imaginable possibilities have the system offshore where it could be intensifying out over the Atlantic. But all of them, not all of them actually, some of them have just gone out of the way, but most of the possibilities keep it in this general area for, this is up through Wednesday evening, so for days, and the Hurricane Center even talks about it on Thursday, keeping it in that general area. So no way to pin that down anymore. All right, looking at the alerts and the warnings and the watches from the National Hurricane Center, notice all along the coast here in red, that's the tropical storm warning for kind of fringe effects. The center is a very high probability to be offshore, as we saw, but this is a fairly large system, so tropical storm force winds along the coast there. Also for the lower Keys as it comes on by, although I don't think it's going to be a lot worse than what we've seen unless it intensifies pretty quickly. Let's look close up here, and what we see there is in that area where we're expecting landfall now on the new forecast. You see hurricane warnings in effect. Right now, forecasting a Category 1. The rule is if they're forecasting Category 1, you get ready for a Category 2, although this forecast is for just a low-end Category 1. But still, how much the system can intensify in the Gulf of Mexico remains a bit of an open question, although, as I said, the computer models do not forecast rapid intensification or a high possibility of rapid intensification at the current time. But the fact that it has become Debby sooner opens up that possibility a little more in my mind. Okay, now let's take a look at the storm surge situation. Since it is forecast to be a stronger storm and this coastline up there in the Big Bend, it's like a catcher's mitt. It just catches the water and it's so incredibly vulnerable to storm surge from about the Taylor County line there on down to about Cedar Key, up to 7 feet above normal high tide is the forecast. Now, that includes whatever the tide is. So if it comes in at high tide, then somewhere in there is going to get 7 feet above the normal high tide if the forecast is right. If it's a lower tide, then you can take a couple feet off of that. But in any case, high storm surge, deadly storm surge in that part of the Big Bend. In fact, high storm surge all the way from about Apalachicola here, all the way around. And even in the Tampa Bay area, again, if it comes in at high tide, that's somewhere in that Tampa Bay region up to 4 feet above normal high tide. So if it comes in, let's say, at a lower tide, and the tide is lower, say 2 feet lower than a normal high tide, then somewhere can expect 2 feet above normal high tide. So this is a combination of the effect of the storm and the tide, could be up to 4 feet in somewhere in that area. Then down to the south, you see that up to 4 feet extends all the way down to include the Fort Myers, Punta Gorda area, and then the dividing line here is Bonita Beach, so a little less than that farther south, because obviously the storm is not going to be as strong in the southern Gulf. All right, let's time this out here. Tonight, the organization process continues, and you can see this is where the bands are coming in from the south into the southern part of the state, although some dry air comes in here, so we have gaps in the bands, and this is where the solid part of the storm is intensifying. Then we move north through tonight into tomorrow and get to tomorrow afternoon, and this would be more or less late afternoon tomorrow, according to the current timing from the Hurricane Center. It looks like a conducive environment. Some of the models do bring in some dry air here, which may be one of the reasons that they're not causing this thing to significantly rapidly intensify, but we're going to be ready for a stronger storm than is forecast, as we always are with storms in the Gulf. And then you have this very strong moisture feed over the state of Florida, bands of heavy rain, so waves of rain moving in from the Gulf all the way from southwest Florida all the way north. And already tomorrow, you're seeing this moisture accumulating against a cold front there that's pushed into the southeastern part of the U.S. So that's just beginning the process. And then, of course, the storm comes up here somehow and takes all that moisture with it on up into the low country and in the beginning of the week. So we've got a long way to go here with this system. Tomorrow, it moves north in the state of Florida. Everybody under any kind of a warning or a watch, please get yourself informed of what exactly that means for your area here, because we will have, by every expectation, life-threatening conditions in some parts of the state of Florida, especially obviously to the north, but also low-lying areas along the coast in the Tampa Bay area and all the inlets and harbors and everything that we have up and down the coast. Obviously at high tide will be the biggest threat. We're covering this nonstop on Fox Weather, of course, and I want to put this graphic up as I've been doing the last couple of days, because people ask me all the time, well, wait a minute, is Fox Weather on my TV? And the answer is, if you have any kind of a streaming device, it is. And just go to that foxweather.tv or scan that QR code, and it'll tell you exactly how you can get the Fox Weather coverage. Mike Seidel, the famous hurricane tracker Mike Seidel, joined us today, as a matter of fact, and he's covering the storm from the Tampa St. Petersburg metropolitan area. So I'll see you on Fox Weather, and of course I'll see you right here as well. All right, have a good evening, and we'll talk tomorrow.